Hello, you are listening to 91.3 FM KUWS, a joint service of Wisconsin Public Radio and the University of Wisconsin-Superior. My name is Annie Dugan. I'm an instructor in the Visual Arts Department here at UWS, and I'm joined today by Evaline Britton, an artist who is on display in our project gallery in the Holden Fine Arts Center. The first doors off of the parking lot, you can walk in and turn right and you will see Evaline's work. The title of the exhibition is Here. It opens May 1st from 5 to 7 and will be up on view through May 16th. Gallery hours are 3 to 7 daily, Monday through Friday. Welcome, Evaline. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Annie. It's so nice to be here.
So Evaline Britton is a 2024 graduate of the Studio Arts here at UWS, and is currently in grad school at UMass Dartmouth, their post-bac grad certificate program that she is doing remotely. And this exhibition is part of your graduation requirements, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Nice. So tell us a little bit about, and the work on view is all ceramic.
Yep.
You were a visual arts major at UWS and you specialized in ceramics, but it was more than just clay for sure.
Yeah.
Can you tell us sort of maybe just the roots of falling in love with that medium, and why have you kept on with that medium? What is it about clay? What does it do? Why is it answering some of the questions that you have as an artist?
Yeah. So I started at UWS and I had taken ceramics classes throughout high school and I loved it then. I liked working on the wheel. I loved the feeling of clay. It was something really magical. And so I started here at UWS, but I went into every studio class. I didn't take ceramics right away. I took some other ones first. And I started in every class with this idea that I need to go in and learn whatever I can because maybe this one's better than ceramics. Maybe it's going to be more exciting. And so by the time I got to ceramics, I actually was injured. I had a thumb injury, so I had to only work on I couldn't throw on the wheel. I had to hand build everything. And I started working in there, and I started having conversations with Mike McGuire, the ceramics professor here. And I just had more questions about materials that we could use and why we were firing things to certain temperatures and what materials we're going to do. And this whole idea of this wall of powders and metals and everything could be mixed together to make clay, and then we stick it in this high temperature kiln and fire them. I was like, this is crazy cool. The whole process of building something to firing it to having it come out was just this entire eye-opening situation for me, and I just really wanted to keep moving through it, and I just never had enough questions answered doing it. And so I just kept taking ceramics classes. I was offered the position to work as Mike's studio assistant in the ceramic studio, so I got to have some more behind-the-scenes things. So I did studio inventory, cleaning the studio, and I never, even on the most mundane jobs of sweeping the floor, was never something that was tiring to me. I was like, this is so cool, and to watch this soft material that is essentially relatively cheap that we're digging from the ground turn into this valuable rock was just so insane to me. And so I just kept working with that. And that's something that I have coming through now. I've been drawn to ceramics for the idea that you can build it, you can sculpt it, but it's also this thing that we use every single day of our lives. We're eating out of cereal bowls, we're drinking out of cups. And so we're touching it, we're interacting with it. And that is something that this tactile quality, and I've always wanted to in our art exhibits, touch things that are on exhibit. And I know that's not something I'm allowed to do ever, but I've always really been enamored by that. And so ceramics has always felt this happy medium of yeah, you can interact with it and have this connection with it beyond it just sitting on a pedestal. So
that's beautiful. I love that quote of you never have you never run out of questions. I think that should be a good measure of any kind of pursuit. Yeah. And while you were at UWS, you also did some really interesting, I think I love listening to you talk about the mystery and wonder of the material. And you did some really cool explorations of that material and how it relates to it relates to memory. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it was, I think, watching you go through that process, I think set the stage for the art that we're looking at in the gallery today.
Yeah, of course. So as soon as you start working with clay, one of the first things that like I was told from multiple instructors was that clay has memory. And this idea that like you're going to pick it off the wheel, and if you bump it or something, it might revert back to that because it's going to hold memory. And so I started working with clay, and like one of my first exposures to clay was living here in Superior. We have this lovely red clay that as soon as you start to garden, you're hitting it. And like I would take that and like sculpt it, and I stained so many clothes. My mom was not happy with it. And like I was like, oh, I could work with this clay. Like, what is different from this to like what I have in the studio? And so I started having these conversations with Mike again, and I was like, what can I do? And so he was like, well, you should read this information and read this information, and then we'd have more conversations. And it started to come out that like the clay that I was finding in my backyard was high in lime content and not necessarily super conducive to building, but it led to like, but it's a low firing clay and we're firing to high temperatures, so I can liquefy it and use it as a glaze on my pieces and use it for decorative purposes. And so I'm not having any issues with the integrity of the piece that I'm making. And so it led into this whole exploration of collecting clays from across Minnesota and Wisconsin and doing research on them and liquefying them to make viable slip glazes with the least amount of processing possible. And so I was really lucky while I was here to get 2 undergraduate research grants to go through and work on both of those projects over the course of the summer and then present that research on a couple of different areas. And I still use a lot of those slip glazes in my work. I have clays from, here in Superior. I have clays from over in Washburn, up on the Iron Range where my family's from, and then from places we've gone on vacation. So I have clays from Montana where I have a lot of family as well that I've brought back. And I'm still using them in my work. Like most of the pieces in the studio, in the gallery right now, have some of those slips on there because it's this really interesting way to like tie that memory of this place into that piece without explicitly showing it.
Wonderful. That's beautiful. Can you talk about how that did so this exhibition really is a deep dive. Like you have taken this past year while you're in the post-bac program to have the time to engage with these ideas that you're like these questions that you still have. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about sort of that journey? Can you touch on that journey and sort of how that those questions that you've started to explore in undergrad have morphed into the ones that you're exploring in this exhibition?
Yeah. So I think the big thing for me moving into this grad program was that I was really focusing on, I have the technical skills to make this work, but like they're not meeting my expectations. And like conceptually, is that coming across to the viewer? Like I know that. Do you know that? And so we worked pretty extensively, unit by unit, focusing on like one skill and then building on that. So my first 4 units of work were all focusing on just the form. Like, how do I find a form that I like? How does it capture some semblance of movement? Like, that was really big for me. And then what's the structure of the pieces? Like, what makes a solid piece for me? Like, what feels right? And so I ended up settling on, like, some sort of movement, but, like, really learning and taking movement from, like, how we can move our bodies and, like, ballet dancers especially. I did a lot of, like, figure drawing from ballet dancers and images that I was finding of different dancers doing things because like they were so close to being in balance, but they're yet balanced. Like you look at them and it's like, yeah, they are balanced. And so trying to take that and translate it into like my work, I'm often like standing in the studio stretching in like really weird positions, trying to like mimic the way that my pieces are moving. And like if I'm starting to bend in a way and I'm like feeling off balance, I'm like, okay, no, I have to rework this because it's not going to work for the piece. And then from there, moving into the surface design, like how do I make the surface feel like how I want it to feel? And so I look at a lot of fiber work. I have the clays that I'm using. I'm really interested in like abstract expressionist work, so that super drippy look that they can get. And how can I incorporate all of these ideas within the surface of my pieces using the materials that I'm interested in and those clays. So I've been... I paint and then I silkscreen and then I spray through my pieces. Like it's kind of this mass chaos. And then I bisque fire them and they come back and I'm like drawing on the surface with other pastels and things, and then I glaze them, and sometimes I reglaze them, and then it ends into like, I've been recently working on like image transfers onto the surface as well to like create this like kind of scrapbook look to them, and like, you know, physically putting an image on there, but trying to make sure that image is something that could transcend generations, like not just my memories, but like other people can look at the image and be like, oh, I know that feeling. So it's been this fun like deep dive into just, you know, memories and then the materials and how those can all come together.
That's beautiful. And that's so interesting that I love what you were saying about dancers having this sort of, in your work too, having this chaos, and how do you find the balance within that chaos? How do you find the through line through that chaos? And this idea of movement being related to memory in a really beautiful way that, the whole, like, you never forget how to ride a bicycle, right? We hold memories in, beyond just the what we think of as like the memory in the brain. There's the memory in the body. There's the memory in the clay body. So those kinds of ways of thinking of it, it's I think one thing that I appreciate about looking at ceramics is this, like you touched on, this visceral quality of it. Like, right, you can imagine what it feels like to touch, and the idea that that there's visceral memories that transcend, your experience. Like I love the bowl of there's the image that you use of a kid in an inner tube on the water, right? We sort of all, or many of us, have a visceral memory of what that feels like, and can translate. So I think I think it's or I should say, is it a challenge to do that? I mean, I think a lot of the decorative imagery that you have on your work in that exhibition is flower-based, which is also very site-specific. So here you're, grabbing clay from all over Minnesota. Are the flowers that you're choosing meaningful in any way, or are they designs that you find particularly interesting?
Yeah, so flowers, since I was a little kid, have been another thing that I've just been really attracted to. And I think, especially living up here in the Northlands, summer is such a small little window. And like the time that these flowers are in bloom is even the smaller point. And so when I was little, I was always the kid that was like picking massive bouquets. And one of my favorites that I would pick, especially from my grandma, were asters, wild asters. And she always told me that it was her mom's favorite flower, and so it made her feel really special. So whenever I saw them, I would always pick a big bouquet for her. And so they've just continued. Every time I see them out in the field, I'm like, ugh, I know that I know that flower. It's a special one, and I'll always pick a big bouquet. And so I use asters a lot in my work because of that family connection, that like really close tie, and they're such a pretty little flower that clumps together, and they really, I think it's interesting because they are so like sparse with their petals to a certain degree. Like they're not all clumped together, they group together, but they're like almost like this viney offshoot. Like they're always reaching a little bit higher, and so to have that on the surface of my work is also, I think, interesting. With a lot of my pieces trying to reach for something that like motion, I think it ties together really nicely, so I use that flower in particular a lot.
Wonderful. And some of the forms themselves in the exhibition read, some of the forms read as dancers, and which you've touched on a little bit. And then some of the forms read, there's decoration that alludes certainly to flowers, but then the piece themselves are flower-based. Can you talk about, finding not only just the decoration, but the form as well?
Yeah. So I think, I don't want to, but like dancers, they have that tutu, that elegance, like it almost feels like that flower form within that. And so I was really like trying to separate, is it the movement of the dancers or is it the costuming of the dancers that I'm really tied to? So for a while I was toying with that. And I still think I go between both of them. Like there's not one that I go for. But then within the like idea of the flower, like using some of that imagery and then the flower and the reaching, and it's like, well, they're moving too, and the dancers are moving, and so trying to explore, both sides of the flowers. Yeah, I've been trying to judge which way I want to go with things and how to integrate the both of them because there feels like a connection, but sometimes I struggle to put a word to like what that connection is.
Yeah. Speaking of, what have been the challenges of this exhibition? I mean, as far as like, and just now you've mentioned some of the questions that you still have, but are there, do you feel like you're still wrestling with this body of work?
For sure. I think I'm still at a point in my career where I'm still trying to find like what I actually am doing with my work. Like I'm still pretty new at this. And like what am I trying to achieve? And so I have been like struggling with like how does it actually look together? Like having it up in the gallery, that's the first time that I've seen all of them like in the same space together. Like it was firing one after another. And then like working in a different mindset in the program that I'm in right now, like just approaching things differently, the time constraints that everything is, and like making sure I'm making the deadlines and making enough work for each deadline. Like that was a thing that I was struggling through for a little while, just trying to figure out how that all worked together. And then, just making sure that like each piece is hitting conceptually what I want it to hit, and then that it's reading to other people. And then taking that feedback and figuring out how to address that the same way. And like, internalize, how do I want to take that feedback? Is it something that is valuable to me, or is it going against how I want others to view my work and how I see my work? And so navigating that as well.
Yeah. Do you notice that you look at or watch, after sort of, because I think throwing a pot is also such a physical act.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, and here you're watching ballerinas, do you watch dance in a different way now after throwing for so long?
Yeah. When I get to watch ballet live, it's such, and I think I've always looked at like the strength and the technical ability of the dancers that are going on, the time that it takes them to have trained to that point, and then also to, have the stamina to be out there for the length of the performance is absolutely stunning. And I'm always in awe of them and what they are able to do because I know it's something that I am not ever able to do. And I love it so much. Like, it's just such a beautiful experience to go and take part in and to get to experience. And so going back in the studio, it's like, yeah, this is a different craft. It's a different way to highlight that, but it's definitely still really important to like, I'm standing on stools and I'm coiling, I'm hauling heavy bags. Like I'm still doing all this really physical things. And yet I'm trying to make more delicate work with a very hard material.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that, I think that also that idea of like this material, especially the liquid clay that you're using is, going from this transformance from liquid to solid to, ballet, you're sort of left with a memory. It's a fleeting thing with clay. It's the thing that is left behind of that physical act. Yeah. What questions do you still have? Like, what are you, this is the culmination of your post-bac graduate program. What do you want to keep exploring?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've been working with the image transfers onto the surface, like going back to materials. Like I just started working with that. I worked with it a little bit last spring before I graduated, and I was like, this is really cool, but I have no idea how I want to use it. And I remember last spring I was talking to Susan, our photography professor here, and I was like, I think I want to coat my stuff in like gelatin emulsion and do black and white photography on it. And she's like, well, you should read this book and then we can talk. And I was like, that's not gonna work for what I'm making. It's not the right look. And so then moving to the super sauce, I was like, oh, this is really cool. Like I can get any image, I can edit it on Photoshop and print it out and transfer it on there. And now I'm like, I finally got to the point where I had pieces I want to put that on, and I did it, and I was like, oh, this is really cool, but there's also things that, like, in the construction I have to think about how I'm making them, and I'm like, so I really think I want to keep exploring, like, the surface design of my pieces and how to integrate those images, but not get to the point where, like, the images are no longer feeling like they're connecting with a wider range of audiences. Like, I don't want to put family photographs or like very specific family photographs that other people aren't going to relate to. I want to have images on there that is going to reach a wide audience or a wider audience. than just like personal things. And so those are questions I'm still navigating. And then I'm also still trying to figure out, what I'm still wrestling with, like, how do I want to fire my things? Like, I've had certain access and there's still like processes I want to try. Like, I'd love to try soda firing and see if that's a better way to fire my work. Like, there's all these technical things that I'm like, I still want to try them and figure them out, but then make sure that they're still hitting conceptually what I want to get across. Like, I still really want to hit on these ideas of memory and place and the importance of like the movement and the tactile motion in them. So how can I make all of these things fit together, but still play and explore these other things? Because I think, especially for me, like my art process is a very playful one. Like I try to, keep it light and just have a lot of fun. A lot of times I go in the studio, and if I'm doing decoration on a day, it kind of looks like a little kid just got loose in an art store, and like I have paints and brushes and pastels everywhere, and it's chaotic. But like that's just how my brain processes through everything, and so I like to keep things really fun when I'm working too.
That is lovely. And you, speaking of fun, you have a piece up on view right now that's part of the Prove and the Nordic Center's exhibition of May flowers, which I think is beautiful. You will be the selected artist at the Superior Public Library in June. So right when people walk through the doors, they can see your work on view. And you will also have a piece in the Duluth Art Institute membership exhibition. So your chaos is spreading out from just what's on view at the Holden Fine Arts Center right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what else? Is there anything that I did not ask you that I needed to ask you during this interview?
I can't think of anything. I think we hit on a lot of things.
Wonderful. Well, we are so fortunate to have your work on view. We're so fortunate to have your energy and your playfulness as part of the ecosystem in the visual arts department. So thank you, Evaline, and thanks for being with us today. The exhibition Here by Evaline Britton will open May 1st from 5 to 7. It'll be up on view in the Project Gallery in the Holden Fine Arts Center through May 16th. Folks can park in the Holden parking lot, walk through those doors to the Holden Fine Arts Center, and turn right, and you will see that work. It's on view Monday through Friday, 3 to 7 p.m. You have just listened to 91.3 FM KUWS, a joint service of Wisconsin Public Radio and the University of Wisconsin Superior.